fancy coming, so I thought, well, yeah, I've got it.
It's my husband Terry, our daughter was married at the Queen's Hall, one of the last ones to be married there.
I remember coming here and seeing Manfred Mann.
Here it was like me and my friends, do you know what I mean?
And we can't let it just disappear from memory, you know, when we're gone, no deal. Everybody will just think there's always been a block of flats there. So there's talent competition.
Just sent on her, you know.
Well, she lived in Coronation Drive.
That's lovely.
Jack Flores' concept of a book and DVD.
It's now a block of flats, which is probably a sign of the times. Turns and nothing.
Team. When did they win?
Originally it was going to be on the windows.
Maybe some of us here might remember the local groups. It was the Almost Blues and the Micro.
It came to...
When you hear something that you think, oh, I really want to know more about that.
Yes, okay, yeah. I'm Jean Charlton and I came to work at the Widnes Weekly News in 1956. So I was here when Queen's Hall opened, and I remember one of the chief reporters came over and said, "Oh, we had the opening ceremony today, and it was called it's called Queen's Hall, and I think the name was chosen by Councillor John Collins. I think he chose the name for it." So,
well, before the Queen's Hall, there was nowhere where we could assemble to do a variety of things. If you wanted to put a concert on, you had to pay for a church hall or a school hall. So he thought that there should be a place of assembly, was the phrase he used. And so he was looking round anyway for somewhere, and then it just so happened that in the early 50s the Methodist Church decided they no longer needed this huge church in Lacey Street because all the people were moving to the outskirts of the town, and he, as leader, persuaded the council that they should acquire this and turn it into a hall for everybody's use in the town, and it was not to be a profit-making concern.
Well, I started in the 50s. Yes, there'd be just a few people sort of in the base, as it were, none in the pews going up. Well, it was oval, as it were. So there were pews on the ground, base, and then there were pews that were rising up from there. But when I was preaching there, people were just sort of on the ground level, as it were. I mean, my mother remembered it when it was full, but that would be a long time ago. Well, I feel very sad that the original oval-shaped had to go, because it was a very interesting building. It was just odd because you were talking to this huge space with just a very few people down there. I mean, it was being taken over by the town to be used as a hall, so it wasn't losing it. So you couldn't have a concert hall that was like that, and it has more and more lost it. Well, poor thing's gone altogether, hasn't it, now?
Well, the Queen's Hall was a magic place when it first opened. It was the first place where we could have proper concerts and parties and balls and things. And I think my first memory was going to a Saturday night concert there by the BBC, and it was John, my husband, who had found that the BBC in Manchester hadn't got a proper hall for recording in those days, and the acoustics in the Queen's Hall were the best in the north of England. And so he invited the orchestra to come, and we all went and had a free concert, and then the concert was broadcast at lunchtime all over Britain, and the name of Widnes was broadcast all over Britain in a nice context, in a cultural context.
Well, they were advertised for bands to come to appear at the Queen's Hall. So we came down and asked the questions, and they said, yes, it's on a Monday night if you'd like to turn up. So we came to the Queen's Hall, not knowing that at that stage, the famous group became the Beatles were also in competition on the same stage as the Quarrymen. We, as the Ramblers group, became the Ramblers. We won competition after competition, and they were in it at least 3 times, as we can remember, the Quarrymen, and we beat them.
Remember Jack Kinsella?
Jack Kinsella.
He was a
fantastic,
fantastic cartoonist. Yeah. And we painted it white, and he said, "I'll do all the cartoons on that," and he did. It was fantastic.
Queen's Hall was very important to Scouting from more or less when it opened as a public hall. Scouts, as far as I know, started using it in 1958 for the Scout gang shows, which were held every 2 years until 1971. And then there was a bit of a gap, and we had 2 more gang shows in the early 90s. I was involved with most of them in one way or another. Early on, as a 10, 11-year-old scout, I was in the gang shows. My dad was involved, my older brothers were all involved. Mainly short sketches. Scouts have always done sketches around campfires and that sort of thing. So 2 or 3 minutes each, and then perhaps a song, the chorus, you know, that sort of thing. Sometimes in a 2-hour show there might be 25 or 30 actual sketches or acts. Some would be just 2 people on stage, perhaps singing a duet, or that's the sort of thing. It was just different people would rehearse in different places and then bring it together. Yes, the Cheetahs began their career, if you like, at the Scout Gang show in, I think it was 1960 or 1961. They did about 3 or 4 songs at the gang show. Shadows type music, but that's where they began, and they still get together occasionally now and play.
We formed for the Jubilee Gang show, which was held at the Queen's Hall, so it was the first real gig that we played at. So we practiced and got together purely for that Queen's Hall venue.
Dave said he'd seen the Beatles at the Queen's Hall, and I said, were they as good as the Shadows? And he said, I think they were better. So I came to watch the Beatles next week, and I thought, he's right. So we had a vocalist then. And John, I think, we tried a few before we got John. And the others were no good, but this boy turned us round. Big names played there.
I think that was what the thing was. We were used to playing in small places, and then when you went into the Queen's Hall, it was such a big place, you know, and also it had the history with the Beatles. After the Beatles came, all the big bands used to come here, didn't they?
Mm.
I saw a lot of people here, and I can remember with the 60s being this period of change, and I remember standing in the Queen's Hall one night and thinking, there's something happening, you know, there's like an undercurrent, there's something going to happen. By that I meant there's a change in music, there was a change in fashion, there was a change in attitude. It just carried on from there, didn't it? It you know, it was amazing.
Well, it kicked off the Cheetahs, and in my life, and these guys, I'm sure, it's a big part of family history.
Yeah.
And now I've got 2 sons who play with the Cheetahs. It's even more personal.
Yeah.
You know. So the Queen's Hall kicked it all off for us.
My connection with the Queen's Hall is mainly as one of the audience of events, just you know, attending events. You know, because it was a local venue. But other than it being a great venue, which I thought was a brilliant venue, second to none, I think it was a cultural connection. As I wrote in the piece I've given you, or for the book, it was, to me, it was more than a venue. It was an institution. It was a landmark.
Well, my earliest memory would be 1979. I recall doing the moon stomp to madness is one step beyond, dressed in the skinhead regalia, and that's probably my first vivid memory of the place.
The earliest memory is of coming to a gig when I would think I would be about 17, something like that. Can't remember what the gig was. I think it was local bands. I remember some people jumping around with their arms by the side, and I didn't know what that was, and then it turned out that must have been the first time I saw Paul going.
And came to Queen's Hall for quite a lot of occasions, all sorts of things like there was model railway exhibitions, flower displays, dances. The last person I saw here was Val Dunican, who had been my favourite since the early 1960s.
I didn't know about. I mean, I didn't know at the time, in '57, that it was such a big thing. I thought it wasn't just a case of it opened 1 week. It was like there was a build-up to it in the town, and the Widnes Council had this idea of it being a sort of, focal point of arts and culture, which it was, which it subsequently became.
I first came here when there was the very first miniature railway exhibition, and I think it was either free or it was the ghastly price of a shilling to get in. And I do remember cups of tea and coffee were 5p, because my dad complained about the rip-off prices, because I think they were only 2p in his works canteen at Bush's.
My connection to the Queen's Hall is through its having regular dances on, whether it be Saturday night or any celebration within the town. And later on, they started indoor bowling in the winter.
Well, the Queen's Hall has always been here for me, because, as I say, I grew up in the area, so, initially, of course, when it was the church, not that we attended that church, and then when it came to be the Queen's Hall, I can remember all the dances that used to go on there. And Friday night was always a dance night, and a night when all the girls used to go out together. They didn't usually go home with boyfriends or anything on a Friday night. The night we were there. And there was a celebration for the Widnes Corporation annual bus dance. My mother's friend had asked her to go because her husband had something to do with the corporation. And so my mother said, come with us, you see, because she knew the girls used to like to go on a Friday night. So we all went, and these are some of my friends here. And then my mother, that's me here. And that's my mother, and then some of the other friends that are on there. Well, as I've said before about this, it was the bus garage annual dance, and of course it was the night that changed my life. And I keep this photograph in my wedding album at the back. The night that changed my life, was it for the better? Yes. 54 years later. This was last year when it was our golden wedding, I did that. So, but this is our wedding day. We were married on the
4th of April, 1964.
That's right, he remembers. So that was us in those days.
It was a big dance night. Everyone used to be all dancing there. It was a packed hall every time. We enjoyed it, That's my main memories of the Queen's Hall. The music and the dancing, and that's it with me,
My memories were obviously the same as what Dennis has mentioned with reference to that, but again, the Queen's Hall being owned by Halton Council, many of the functions, the mural functions and civic receptions and things like that were always held in the Queen's Hall.
My connection with the Queen's Hall goes back to being a really young kid. I got involved with playing in the stage bands in the main hall there, and when we used to have all the theatre stuff on the plays and whatnot, they used to get a stage band together. And I started out doing that when I was 15 years old, playing the keyboards under the direction of the musical director at the time there, who was Roy Jones.
And the first encounter inside the Queen's Hall I can remember was a performance that we did for college while I was at the sixth form college, probably about 85, 86. I can't remember what it was for. I seem to remember it was at a weekend. I was performing the Stanley Holloway monologue per tuppence per person per trip.
My first strong memory of the Queen's Hall is when I was at school, junior school, and we came to see Atara's band. He was a flautist, flute player.
Was that from Bod?
One concert that, in fact, I've forgotten about until you just asked me that. They brought us here to see an Israeli folk singer called Atara Bentovim.
Yeah, I think I thought I'd imagined was this Atara Bentovim. I remember this mad woman coming around and teaching kids about musical instruments. So I was probably at St Basil's infant school at the time. I remember coming in, it was just this huge place as a little kid, this enormous place. And was brilliant with it having a balcony upstairs, and never went upstairs till I was a lot older, but it was just a fabulous place, really, really.
Some of the activities that went on in the Queen's Hall, I've got the BBC Northern Orchestra playing there, when they filled the stage in half the floor as well with musicians. Putting my other hat on now as a member of the Horticultural Society, when I was on the committee there, we had our shows here every August, September, because we changed our dates a couple of times, from 1961 through to its closure. And then we had to move, of course. I also have one of Manfred Mann on the stage here. Quite a few activities.
I'd love to be able to say my first recollection of the Queen's Hall was Gentle Giant in 1971, but I was probably about 5. My first memory actually was coming here to see pantomimes. In my dad's various jobs, they used to have kind of Christmas dues, and as you got older you were brought along to a pantomime, and just echoing what Jez has said, a fantastic building, and just, you know, as a small child walking into that to see kind of all this kind of stuff that goes on, all the cliches, all the behind you, and you know, all that kind of stuff was great.
One of the interesting articles that I came across, I think, was 1971, and it was a female topless wrestler was coming to Widnes, and tickets were on sale. And then when I looked at the following week's weekly news archive, it'd been banned. It was no longer being allowed to happen, which I'm sure that some people in Widnes found unfortunate, while others found it quite fortunate. But in the 70s, I presume people would have found it unfortunate, but said it was fortunate that it wasn't on.
Always been involved in the Queen's Hall, really, to be honest, since I was a small child. Gigs, parties, Christmas dues, everything like that. I worked for the council for quite some time at the Queen's Hall, and obviously when the studio first started up as well.
My connection with the Queen's Hall goes back to the early 70s, and I'll be honest, it was a massive part of my musical sort of career, if you like.
I think one of the earliest gigs I came to was because there was a big period of sort of school and whatnot where you couldn't really go out because you weren't old enough. And then I remember there was a Liverpool rock band called Nuts who played here, and it was like my first, I can't remember the exact date, it was one of my first sort of local gigs that I came to, certainly at the Queen's Hall, the one I remember them the most. And they were like a Liverpool rock band, and they were going on, I think they were touring with Status Quo, and it was like, wow, this is like it was an amazing gig.
Sort of first memories obviously were seeing like the Edgar Broughton band, and obviously Hawkwind, If, Cat Iron, Egg, if anybody remembers those people.
I distinctly remember in my last year of school coming here, and it was probably a Thursday night, and getting drunk. I happened to be in school next day, and it was Blackwood Heart and IO. So I don't know how long ago that was. That must have been
band.
81, 82 at least.
The best concert I ever come to was in Glen Tilbrook in 1999. Out of this world. It was utterly brilliant. There was just something about that night. Perhaps also it might sound strange. Maybe it was the date it took place. It was near the end of the millennium. It was as though, like, you know, the Queen's always ending its decade with this fantastic concert.
I mean, obviously the Beatles played there, and I believe the Stones played as well. I'm too young to have seen that. I did see all the Manchester stuff that happened there as well, and played, I think, a couple of them gigs as well. When we started to get it going again, I'd say the first ones we got in were Glen Tilbrook, Catherine Williams, but we had some crackers. We had the Two-Tone Collective and members of the Specials and the Selector and the Beat. That was a fantastic night. We had, remember Bob Geldof at one time had a band kind of like the Pogues, and he played there, and he was a really nice bloke as well to get on with. That was really good. We had Julian Cope. It was brilliant. Hugh Cornwell from the Stranglers were brilliant. Wilco Johnson, who's big again now. At the time, you know, he wasn't so much. Saw Doctors was a great night, and Damned was a great night. Lots. So it was great to see those people. And the thing worth mentioning is they all said it was a great place as well.
Obviously, you've got the Stone Roses, Happy Mondays. Obviously, very big names at the time.
Johnny Vegas, we had through, and we had an absolute nightmare of a show. There was a load of problems with the sound in the main hall. We kind of rectified them, got them dealt with. Then we started having some lighting issues, and bits of power dropped out. We got through it all. We got to the interval. I went backstage and was like, look, I'm really, really sorry about all of this. You know, we've dealt with it all now. It's not going to happen in the second half. I'm really, really, really sorry. And his attitude was, well, that's the best material I've had. What am I going to do in the second half? Sit down, have a pint, calm down. Let's talk it through, and yeah, let's see what we can do in the second half now. So, you know, some great moments with things like that, where stuff that was going horribly wrong built into his. I'm sure the people in the building realised it was going wrong, but you know, he had a laugh and joke about it.
I think it was 80. I'm only guessing at this now. I think it was 1982. We had BBC here with the Gardener's Question Time, with all the old faces there, you know, Bill Sowerbutts and Clay and a few of the others, all the ones that used to be associated with it on the radio. And before they started, they were going along, and first thing I knew, they called me to the front, they gave me this Banksy medal. So I was very happy with that.
We supported, when I was in a band called the Chaps, we supported Engine, who were like a bikers sort of rock band, who were quite big at that time.
Even when you don't like him or you do, the Mac Lads, I mean, that was an iconic gig, and I know Mutley Mac Lad, and it went down in folklore. They used to play up and down, obviously, the country, and they were even talked about in the House of Commons as the most reviled band in the country. And somebody threw a pig's heart on the stage. It's like, I mean, they've had bricks thrown at them, bottles, glasses, everything, but they always remembered the gig at the Queen's Hall where somebody threw a pig's heart on the stage. It just
yeah, one thing years later that I remember seeing, sometime in the mid-90s, would be a production of the stage version of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, because I always loved the film from when I first saw it, and I loved the Ken Casey book. And it was done by a local group called TAD.
TAD Theatre Company was set up by our drama teacher, who was still at the time at the Widnes Sixth Form College, just wanting to do something a bit more professional outside of college. Him and a guy called Paul Riley, and then sort of there was about 5 of us involved, and we just started putting plays on a regular basis, every sort of, I think it was a monthly turnaround, quite a quick turnaround. In the main hall we did a couple of Shakespeare's, including Macbeth. On 12th night, we did Wind in the Willows.
Wind in the Willows.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And it was a difficult room to put things on in, especially when there weren't many people there.
We organised a gig with Great and Lady Soul, was a band I was in called High Crime, and we organised a gig in 1987 in April, and we sold tickets, and it was jam-packed. I think Greg was mentioning that I think it holds 600, and I think we had 600 people in there. You couldn't move. It was chaos.
It's sad to lose the Queen's Hall, but it's inevitable. You know, it's the way of the world. You know it's coming. And I don't mind that. I don't mind the progress, and I don't mind the change, as long as we find other outlets and other things to do for the community, particularly the young people. I think the Brindley's fantastic.
Yeah, I do. I actually think there is something missing. I know we've got the studio, but that venue, it's been there for years. I hate to see anything that's got heritage pulled down, and unfortunately, sometimes you don't get a choice. I know there was a lot of dispute about it at the time. People saying, you know, do you want the Queen's Hall to stay open? And obviously, people did.
The final gig, yeah, that was a bit of a weird one, really, because I didn't really think that it would be the final gig. Just that I was asked to play it, and I think it was one of my first solo gigs with the guitar. And there were 2 stages. They had an acoustic stage underneath the balcony, and then obviously the main stage where all the bigger bands played.
It was a really good night, but it was like they took your right arm away or your leg off. It was like part of your history, and it brought back memories of like when I first went there. It was nice to be involved in the final gig there, but actually apparently there's a video out of it, but I've never seen it. So if anybody's got a copy, you can lend me it.
My memory of that was we were asked to play it, and we couldn't wait to play. We really wanted to do it, and we ended up doing it acoustically. I think the drummer couldn't do it that particular night, and so we just, you know, I borrowed a guitar on the day that was right-handed and strung it left-handed, and I think tuning probably wasn't as close as it should have been, but it was near enough, and it was just great. It was again, that was a fabulous atmosphere, the way the 2 stages were set up, you know, main bands and acoustic bands,
but yeah, just great to be part of it because it meant so much to all of us. And then the other thing that I remember after we'd come off, you know, people come up and talk to you and all the rest of it. There was the kind of mass stage invasion at the end.
Oh, I went halfway to Eddie's run.
Yeah,
brilliant.
And it was great, and there was just loads of us up there singing and just having a great time.
Well, we just knew that they were going to knock it down, so
yeah, we thought we'd do one last bash.
Yeah, and it was dead easy to get people. In fact, there were people upset that they couldn't do things, and then the more people you got involved, it was well, that's how the 2-stage thing came about.
Yeah. And at the end, it was just a massive stage invasion when the Eddies were playing. Really joyful.
Yeah.
I'd probably say everyone that worked here cared about it in their own way. It was, you know, people put in a lot of hours. People genuinely did care. It didn't have the best equipment. It wasn't in the best condition as a building, but everyone sort of took their time trying to keep on top of it, trying to keep the shows going ahead and just keep it open, really. You know, there was a lot of struggles in long before it shut with keeping the place open and going, and somehow they managed it for a good few years.
It'll be remembered by many, many people, probably of our age group in a sense, and maybe 4 or 5 years younger, but not much from them, because it, as I said, it was used mainly for civic functions and things. It became, then when it became derelict for a number of years, it was just left here.
Well, obviously I feel very sad indeed, but towards the end it was getting derelict. We once had to cancel a concert because the rain was coming through the roof, for instance. So I appreciated that to put it right would have cost an awful lot of money.
There was just an aura about the place to me. I have no doubt you have. I've met some other people who were glad to see the back of it.
If you're not going to have a Queen's Hall and you are going to demolish it in the name of progress, and the fact that the building is not fit for purpose, then I think the best thing that it could be used for is to use for affordable accommodation, which I think is what it's being used for at the moment.
People don't want these sort of things anymore now. I'm afraid all these sort of things are dying out, so I suppose the need for a hall's gone. But I don't think it has any. Even the mayor, when he has his mayor's ball, where can they have it now? Well, I don't know where they have it, like, but they have it at the town hall, but nothing to the size of the Queen's Hall here. And I thought that the way up on that up the staircase going to the top, it was great, brilliant, a lovely atmosphere.
Like lots of places like the Queen's Hall, it was a central hub, but it's like everything from an 18th to a big name band, you know. There was always something on that was, you know, it was always happening. I always thought it was a quite happening place, the Queen's Hall.
It's really sad. The funny thing was, is when you saw the piece of grass, when they knocked it down, you couldn't believe that we got 800 people even on that piece of grass. Never mind the stage and all the rest of it. It was that was quite funny seeing that. Yeah, it's really sad that the old place has gone. But I think the studio now, where we sat now, is amazing. It's certainly in better nick than when we had it.
I just say thank you for being a big part of my life, and you know, and you should still be here, you know. But thanks for the memories.
I'm too low now.
You're all right. Go on.